He was trapped. That's the only word for it. By 1968, Elvis Presley was a prisoner in a gilded cage of his own making. The world had changed, but he hadn't, or more accurately, he wasn't allowed to. The man who had ripped up the rulebook of popular music in the 1950s was now a relic. He was a joke to the kids who were listening to the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Bob Dylan. His career wasn't just stalling, it was in a nosedive. Think about what was happening. The summer of love had just happened. Jimi Hendrix was setting his guitar on fire. The Doors were writing dark, poetic songs about death and desire. Music was getting serious. Or it was getting political. It was reflecting a world that was messy and complicated and on fire. And what was Elvis doing? He was making movies. Bad movies. Not just a little bad, but spectacularly formulaically awful. He'd play a race car driver, a water skiing instructor, a pineapple heir, a pilot. The plots were interchangeable. Girl meets boy. Boy sings a few silly songs. They have a misunderstanding. They get back together. The end. The titles told you everything you needed to know. Clambake, Haroom, Scarum, and Double Trouble. The music from these films was just as bad. It was disposable. It was background noise for a flimsy plot. These weren't the raw, dangerous songs that had scared parents a decade earlier. These were jingles. They were contractual obligations. He was releasing 3 of these soundtrack albums a year, and each one sold less than the last. His last #1 hit, Good Luck Charm, felt like a lifetime ago, back in 1962. For a pop star, 6 years without a chart topper is an eternity. He knew it, too. This wasn't a secret he had kept from himself. He hated the movies, he would complain to his friends, to his inner circle. He felt like a fool singing a song to a clam and clam bake, because he was bored, he was frustrated, he was gaining weight. The fire that had once defined him seemed to be out. He was rich, yes. He was famous, absolutely, but he was creatively bankrupt. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, was the architect of this prison. The Colonel was a master promoter, a carnival barker at heart. He saw Elvis not as an artist, but as a product, and the product was selling, just enough. The movie deals were lucrative. They were safe, there was no risk. Parker's philosophy was simple: don't mess with the formula. Keep churning out the movies, keep cashing the checks, live performances were risky. You could have a bad night, a movie was forever, you filmed it, and it made money for years. So, Elvis hadn't performed in front of a live audience since 1961. 7 years. He was disconnected from the very thing that made him great, the energy of a crowd. He was isolated in Hollywood and Memphis, surrounded by people who said yes to everything. He was losing his edge. He was losing himself. This was the situation in 1968. He was 33 years old, an age when many artists are hitting their creative peak. But he was seen as over the hill, a nostalgia act, a punchline. His career wasn't just on life support. The plug was about to be pulled. Something had to change, or he was going to fade away into a trivia question. Then came a lifeline, an offer for a television special. It was sponsored by Singer, the sewing machine company. TV specials were a big deal back then. It was a chance to reach millions of people at once. For the first time in years, there was a glimmer of something different. The Colonel, of course, had his own vision for the special. And it was exactly what you'd expect. He wanted a nice, safe, family-friendly Christmas show. He pictured Elvis in a tuxedo, maybe a festive sweater, standing by a roaring fire, singing a dozen Christmas carols. He'd say a few words to the audience, wish everyone a Merry Christmas, and collect a big check. It was the Colonel Parker way, no risk, no sweat, no soul. But fate, or maybe just dumb luck, intervened. The network and the sponsor hired a young, ambitious director named Steve Binder. Binder was not part of the Elvis machine. He was a guy from the outside. He had directed a big TV special with Petula Clark and Harry Belafonte. He was in touch with what was happening in music and culture. He knew that the Colonel's plan was a recipe for disaster. A Christmas special would be the final nail in the coffin. It would confirm to the whole world that Elvis Presley was now as safe and boring as Bing Crosby. Binder had a different idea. A radical idea. He wanted to remind people who Elvis really was. Not the goofy movie star, but the raw, charismatic, dangerous performer who had changed the world. He wanted to strip away all the Hollywood nonsense and get back to the essence of Elvis. He knew he had to get to Elvis himself, away from the suffocating influence of the Colonel. So he arranged to meet with him, they talked, and for the first time in a long time, someone was talking to Elvis like an artist, not a commodity. Binder asked him what he thought of the music he was making. Elvis admitted he was ashamed of it. Binder asked him what he was listening to. Elvis talked about soul singers like Otis Redding and James Brown. He was still connected to real vital music. The pilot light was still on, buried deep inside. Binder saw it. He saw the hunger in Elvis's eyes, the desire to be great again. He pitched his idea no Christmas carols. Instead, a show that would trace his journey. It would have big, polished production numbers, but the heart of it would be something else. Something raw and real. The key to unlocking this was an idea to reunite Elvis with some of his original band members, guitarist Scotty Moore and drummer DJ Fontana. Well, the guys he started with, the guys who were there when he invented rock and roll in a tiny Memphis studio. Binder's idea was to just put them in a room, give them some instruments, and let them jam, like they used to do backstage all those years ago. They would surround them with a small, live audience to create an intimate, almost gladiatorial atmosphere. The Colonel hated it. It was unplanned, it was messy, it looked cheap, but Elvis loved it. The thought of just playing music with his friends again, with no script, was electrifying. And so they did it. They put on those famous black leather outfits, they sat in a circle, and for the first time in years, Elvis was truly free. He was nervous at first. You can see it in the footage, his hands are a little shaky, but then the music starts. And he comes alive. He jokes with the band, he sneers that famous sneer, he tells stories, he sweats. He sings the old songs, Heartbreak Hotel, Jailhouse Rock, Lottie Miss Cloppy, not as oldies, but as living, breathing things. The power is all there, the voice is stronger than ever. The charisma is off the charts. It's not a performance, it's an exorcism. He's casting out the demons of all those terrible movies and all those silly songs. He's reclaiming his own legend. Those jam sessions, what would become known as the In the Round segments, were the heart and soul of the special. They proved that the real Elvis was still in there. The special was coming together. It was going to be incredible. The big production numbers looked great, and the informal jam sessions were pure magic. But there was still a problem, how to end it. Every great show needs a great finale. A closing statement. The Colonel, of course, had his answer ready. He was still pushing for that Christmas song. His brilliant compromise was that Elvis could do all his rock and roll stuff, but the show had to end with I'll Be Home for Christmas. It was the safe, sentimental ending he wanted all along. It would soften the edges of all that sweaty, leather-clad rock and roll. It was, in his mind, the perfect way to wrap things up. Binder was horrified. He knew that ending the show with a standard Christmas song would undo everything they had accomplished. It would be a complete betrayal of the spirit of the special. After an hour of reminding the world that Elvis was a rebel and an innovator, they would end by turning him back into a safe, family-friendly entertainer. It would be an anticlimax of epic proportions. It would feel like a cop-out, or he told the Colonel no. This created a huge standoff. Binder was ready to quit. But he had one last card to play. He went back to Elvis. He knew he had to find a song that could serve as a powerful, meaningful finale. But what kind of song? To understand the choice they made, you have to understand the year 1968. It wasn't just another year. It was one of the most painful, turbulent, and divisive years in American history. The Vietnam War was raging, tearing the country apart. In April, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis, Elvis's hometown. The country erupted in riots. Just 2 months later, in June, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, who was running for president on a platform of peace and unity, was also assassinated. There was a sense of chaos, of despair. The country felt like it was breaking apart at the seams. Binder and Elvis talked about this. They talked about the state of the world, about the assassinations, about their hopes and fears. Elvis was deeply moved by what was happening. He wasn't a political person in public, but he was a man with a deep sense of spirituality and a good heart. He felt the pain of the country. He wanted to say something, he just didn't know how. Because singing I'll Be Home for Christmas in that climate would have been more than just a bad artistic choice. It would have been profoundly tone deaf. Binder knew they needed a new song. Well, a song written specifically for this moment, for this man, for this show. He went to the show's musical director, a man named W. Earl Brown. Binder explained the situation. He told him, "Earl, I want you to write a song that expresses what Elvis is feeling right now. A song about his hopes for a better world. Forget the rock and roll, forget the movies, write something from the heart." Brown was an experienced songwriter. He understood the weight of the request. He and his wife had been talking about the assassinations of King and Kennedy, and they remembered a specific phrase Dr. King used to say, "I have a dream." That phrase became his inspiration. He thought about the world's pain, but also about the enduring hope for something better, for a place where people could walk together in peace. He went home and wrote. The lyrics came to him quickly. They were simple, direct, and powerful. They weren't overtly political, but they were infused with the spirit of the times. They spoke of a world filled with trouble, of a man searching for hope. They spoke of a dream of a better place, a better day. The next day, Brown and Binder went to Elvis's dressing room. They were nervous. This was it. Everything was riding on this song. Brown sat down at the piano and played it for him. Elvis listened. He was quiet, intense. He read the lyrics. When the song was over, there was a silence in the room. Then Elvis looked up. He said, "I'll do it," and then he added something that would define the rest of his career. "I'm never going to sing another song I don't believe in. I'm never going to make another movie I don't believe in." It was a profound moment. This wasn't just about one song anymore. It was a declaration of independence. He was, taking back control of his life, of his art. He believed in this song. It said what he felt in his heart, but couldn't articulate himself. Now they had to record it. And the recording session became legendary. This wasn't just another day at the office for Elvis. He was completely invested. He sang it over and over, each take more powerful than the last. He wasn't just hitting the notes, he was living the words. The producers and musicians in the studio were stunned. They had never seen him like this. He was pouring every ounce of his pain, his frustration, his hope, and his soul into that microphone. He was singing about a world lost, but also about the possibility of redemption. He was singing about his own life. The Lost in a World That's Filled with Trouble wasn't just about the country, it was about his own creative exile. The hope for a warmer sun was his own hope for a second chance. At the end of one particularly emotional take, he was so drained, so overcome, that he collapsed to the floor of the studio. He was physically and emotionally spent. The crew was silent, some of them in tears. They knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. They had captured lightning in a bottle. This wasn't the movie star, this was the artist, the man. When it came time to film the finale for the TV special, the decision was made to present it with absolute simplicity. No fancy sets, no dancers, no gimmicks, just Elvis. He stood alone on the stage in front of a giant red backdrop that spelled his name in lights. He was wearing a simple, pure white suit. There was no guitar to hide behind, no band to distract from him. It was just him, the microphone, and the camera. The music started, and he began to sing. The performance was breathtaking. It was a prayer. It was a sermon. It was a primal scream. Every word was delivered with a searing intensity. When he sang the lines about his brother walking with him, his hand clenched into a fist. His eyes were filled with a burning conviction. The voice, a magnificent baritone, soared with a power and passion that nobody had heard from him in years. Like, it was raw, desperate, and beautiful. He wasn't performing a song, he was testifying. In those 3 minutes, he channeled all the turmoil of 1968, all his own personal frustrations, and all his desperate hopes for a better tomorrow. He was connecting with the audience not as a celebrity, but as a fellow human being who was scared and hopeful just like them. When the special aired in December 1968, people were stunned. They had tuned in, expecting to see a washed-up star going through the motions. Instead, they saw an artist at the absolute peak of his powers, reborn in a blaze of glory. The show was a massive critical and commercial success. It was the highest-rated program of the week, and that final song was the exclamation point. It was the moment that changed everything. It proved that Elvis Presley wasn't just a part of America's past, he was a vital part of its present. He had something to say. He mattered again. That single performance, that one song, single-handedly revived his career. It blew away the cobwebs of the Hollywood years and reminded the world that beneath the silly movie costumes, there was a voice that could shake the world. It led directly to his triumphant return to live performing in Las Vegas the following year. It led him to Memphis to record some of the greatest music of his career, songs like Suspicious Minds and In the Ghetto. It gave him a second act, a more mature, more meaningful chapter in his story. It was more than just a hit song. It was a mission statement. It was a promise he made to himself and to his audience. He found his voice again, in every sense of the word. He was no longer a prisoner. He was free. The song that did all this, the song that saved his career and gave him back his soul, was If I Can Dream.